There was a girl. Her name was Nellie. It was the summer of my freshman year at Harvard. She wore glasses too. That summer we spent our vacation at the Grand Canyon. We were standing on the highest ledge, looking into each other's eyes and watching the sunset. A deeply intimate moment. Suddenly, we had an impulse to kiss and embrace. I took off my glasses. She took off hers. I took one step towards her. She took one step towards me. And yes, somehow we missed each other. 8 hours later, they brought her up by mule. I gave her 3 transfusions. We had the same blood type. Typo. Sadly, it was too late.
Wow, that's embarrassing. Stuff happens, but life goes on. And according to Reader's Digest, the real test of our manners comes when we are dealing with our most embarrassing moments, boys and girls. Maybe you forgot somebody's name, or maybe you sent an important email to the wrong person. Attorneys do that sometimes. Maybe you broke your plans with someone to do something else, but then got busted. Or maybe you just broke wind in a public elevator. It happens. And now, postcards from pandemic feel like they were taken in another era. At least for some people. Like looking back on platform shoes, bell-bottom pants, disco outfits, maybe bouffant hairdos. And some, like Jeremy Howard, an authority upon whom even the only position to serve as a state governor in pandemic had relied upon, had believed that universal mask wearing could serve as a visible signal and a reminder of the pandemic, because symbols are important. Kind of like marketing. And they had hoped that signaling participation in health behaviors by wearing a mask, in addition to visible enforcement, might increase compliance with public mask wearing, applying just a little bit of peer pressure to those independent souls. And historically, epidemics are times of fear, confusion, and helplessness, in which they thought mask wearing and even mask making or distribution could provide feelings of empowerment and feelings of self-efficacy. And in pandemic, months of discord about the coronavirus epidemic had transformed the cloth mask into a potent political symbol, touted by Democrats as a key part of communal responsibility, labeled by some GOP leaders as a sign of government overreach and as a scarlet letter pinned on the weak, because elections are the most important thing under the evolutionary pressure of a lethal pandemic. But now that the worst is over, moving beyond the political choices that were made, probably the most important question is about that look you get after a lethal pandemic and you discover that while trying hard, very hard to do the right thing, you actually did the worst thing you could possibly do, the wrong thing in a lethal pandemic. But the road to hell is paved with good intentions, so let's get into this lesson. Okay, kids, first let's deal with the easy arguments for and against mask wearing. And while on one side there were actually some folks, no names, but you know who you are, who rejected the science of the 3rd grade BART test and had believed that you had an extra layer of protection, wholly embracing the ludicrous proposition regarding impervious qualities associated with 1-ply cotton against microbial penetration. Look, Space Cadet, call Buzz Aldrin to see if you can borrow his spacesuit, or some scuba diver to see if you can grab their diving equipment, because viruses are really, really small, and for the novel coronavirus, that translates into the smallest configuration deployment particle for tear gas is still 6 times larger than the largest SARS-CoV-2 particle. And even an N95 is only effective against tear gas for an hour. And you got your respiratory protection at 7-Eleven. Okay, you know why they call it N95 at N95? Because it blocks 95% of particles measuring 0.3 microns or larger. And so if that's an N95, let's just say that you went out and got yourself a B5. But tell the Einstein who believed that that simple barrier was hydrophobic and might actually cut off your oxygen or overload your lungs with carbon dioxide to join you, and you know who you are. You go out and, get a little kumbaya singing group and do whatever you have to do to, it's all right to cry. It might make you feel better. But that is easy pandemic science, kids. And if you got that wrong, you probably didn't get it at Harvard. And at least it didn't kill you. And maybe you can remember that when the next pandemic, next time, rolls around someday. Maybe someday soon. Okay, but now let's get into the advanced material. And some of our scholars are familiar with a gentleman named George Santayana, who wrote a book titled The Life of Reason. Everybody has to have a reason. Introduction and Reason in Common Sense. Common sense isn't always that common. And that's where we get the quote that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it over and over and over again. A lot of folks may recall some reflections about the Spanish flu pandemic, although some people were hosting a parade in the middle of a pandemic, totally forgetting about the Liberty Loan Parade in Philadelphia in 1918, right here in Alexandria, but in which we tried to learn from our mistakes. We should have learned quite a bit to prepare for this pandemic, a pandemic that somehow we survived without rapidly developing vaccines. There was one guy, he tried to promote a vaccine. His name was Pfeiffer. He was actually promoting a vaccine for the bacteria that he had discovered and not the virus that people believed at that time they were catching and dying from. But actually, no, they were actually being killed by bacteria pneumonia, but again, not his bacteria, because there is a difference. Not all bacteria are alike. But apparently even Dr. Anthony Fauci had thought a little while ago that we might learn from some of those lessons from the last pandemic. So he and David Morins and Jeffrey Rabenberger wrote a peer-reviewed article in 2008, back in the Obama administration, to let everyone know that, beginning of the Obama election, let everyone know that even though most people believe that the virus had claimed the lives of between 50 and 100 million worldwide, as many as 90% had actually died from pneumonia, which, like most pneumonias, had been caused not by a virus from which everybody's been vaccinated, 70 to 80, 90% for older people, but bacteria. If you want to look it up on the internet, Dr. Fauci's article, see how he writes, maybe ask him for an autograph. It's got a real memorable title, Predominant Role. That means something like, that plays like a big part, of bacterial pneumonia as a cause of death in pandemic influenza. Implications, thoughts, lessons learned, notes, after action review, implications for pandemic influenza preparedness, because you want to be ready when your Jesus comes. And at the very end, they reported this conclusion, I'm going to quote this: the majority of deaths, that means, they won the election, in the 1918 to 1919, oh wow, that's just like 2 years, really, really short, and no vaccines. Influenza pandemic likely resulted directly from the secondary bacterial pneumonia caused by common common upper respiratory tract bacteria. In fact, in terms of aspiration pneumonia, we're going to get into that a little bit. It actually, before pandemic, between 2003 and 2017, averaged about 58,000 cases of undiagnosed bacterial pneumonia that contributed to deaths in hospitals. Recurring problem, 58,000 per year. If severe pandemic influenza, they continue with largely a problem of viral bacteria, co-pathogenesis. Pandemic planning needs to go beyond addressing the viral cause alone. For example, influenza vaccines and antiviral drugs. But of course, we were doing other things. They also say prevention, diagnosis, prophylaxis, and treatment of secondary bacterial pneumonia, as well as stockpiling of antibiotics and bacterial vaccines should also be high priorities for pandemic planning. Okay, somebody didn't remember that. Maybe next time. We only beat Hitler in the Holocaust in half the time. No biggie. Apparently, this old problem snuck up on us in pandemic and caught us with our pants down again. It happens. Okay, but what's the big takeaway we should have remembered from the Spanish flu pandemic? In 1919, in the Journal of American Medical Association, or JAMA for short, W.G. McCullum, a military doctor treating patients in the First World War, wrote an article, Pathology of the Pneumonia Following Influenza. That was an influenza. That was the flu, H1N1, but not coronavirus. And in his note to history, he warned about this bacterial pneumonia, just like Fauci was talking about in 2008, and had stressed that this must be regarded as a secondary infection. But he had also noted distinctions between pneumonias associated with the gastrointestinal system, varying by region, because probably people have different diets depending upon where they are located. And this tends to be how these bacteria find themselves in the gastrointestinal system in the first place. But to become a pneumonia, somehow it has to perform some kind of a gastric bypass to get into the lungs. I highly doubt that viruses are going over, trying to grab a snack, getting the tunnel system going over to the stomach, but they have to somehow make that passage, and scientists have found this phenomenon occurring with gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, and they describe this as microaspiration, a new word to add to your vocabulary, along with recombinant binding domain and angiotensin converting enzyme. That mask, however, you purchased at 7-Eleven is actually quite effective if you want to have something that will block 90% of droplets containing bacteria and viruses being expelled when you breathe. We call that source control. You don't want your germs getting on us, but that will capture those droplets when you cough or sneeze or sing or whatever you're going to do. And where do you think those pathogens then go if they got caught by the mask that is strapped to your face? Those little contaminants are now probably lining up on the inside of your mask, even touching your face. So you can breathe them right back in. Take a deep breath. And if it happens to contain some bacteria from your gastrointestinal system that causes pneumonia, you just effectively help to give yourself pneumonia, which put folks on respirators, and even in this pandemic, are about 23%, at least 23% of the deaths once they went on respirators in pandemic, which put folks on these respirators, and even in this pandemic, are the leading cause of death, pneumonia. So now, does it not look like, despite the hashtag, that masks had empirically saved lives, and the pandemic didn't go quite the way that it went in your head? But no worries. At least it didn't kill you.
This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest. This has been a Filmways presentation, darling.
And y'all come back now.